Good day and welcome, my friends, to Hebraic Living Walking with Messiah broadcast. We're excited to have you here with us today as we explore the rich traditions and teachings of Hebraic living, guiding you on a journey to walk in alignment with your Messiah. I hope that everyone had a fantastic fall holy day season. Now, whether you're seeking spiritual growth, practical insights, a deeper connection with your faith, this show is here to inspire and uplift you. Especially now after the feast, we are in the beginning of a new season. So I hope that everyone had a refreshing and a rejuvenating time and is ready to go forward in this new year, this new biblical year, this new Torah cycle that we are in to draw closer to your Messiah, and also to enrich your understanding of how to walk in alignment with him. Now, in last week's episode entitled Infinity and Beyond, we discussed what comes after the millennium and what our infinite destiny is. And I hope each of you had an opportunity to plug into that show. If not, please go back and review. I think you'll find it very inspiring. Now, in today's episode, we're going to start a new series called Who is Israel? And today we will begin part 1. We will review the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we will explore Abraham's extended lineage. Now, remember to plug in every Tuesday at the same time to see the show live, and you can also view it on demand on the lambnetwork.tv website. Each show is also recorded on the Daily Torah YouTube channel. Welcome to all of our new listeners, and if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single episode. And remember to share these messages with your social media friends. You never know whose life you may affect. Now, if you have your Bibles with you, get them handy or maybe take some notes, and let's begin. We have a lot to discuss today. So let's get the slideshow up on the stage and let's get started. Now, we want to know, who is Israel? Everyone always asks me, what is our part in Israel? If I'm not Jewish or if I'm a Gentile, am I still a Gentile? Am I grafted in, not grafted in? So I put this series together, Who is Israel? Grafted in, part 1. And I think this is going to end up being a 3-part series. So we want to really go through the history of Israel, the promises made, what our role is, and all the things that have happened in the last several thousand years, because there's so much history, so much time has gone by, and there's so much misinformation and confusion in the Messianic and Hebraic roots communities today. So I want to try to set the record kind of clear, kind of straight for everyone of who we are, how we're grafted in, and what our role is in the community. But to get to that part, we have to go back in history a little bit. So we have to look at the promises that were given to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And then we need to do a little bit of a dive into Abraham's descendants, because after Isaac, Abraham had Ishmael, he had other, after Sarah died, he had Keturah, and he had other children after that. So who are they and where did they all go? And then we want to look at Jacob and how his name was changed to Israel and the spiritual significance behind that. So let's begin in Genesis chapter 13, verse 12. In Genesis 13, verse 12, we read, Abram, that was before Abraham's name was changed. Don't you love how God changes everyone's name? He has a new name for each and every one of us also. So Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot, that was his nephew, dwelt in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. Remember, they were living together, and then their herds grew too big for each other to manage, and there was some some arguments, but they couldn't live in peace together. Lot's servants and Abram's servant, they were just stepping on each other's toes. So Lot and Abram separated, and Abram said, "Hey, Lot, take where do you want to go? Pick the spot and then go." So Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain and as far as Sodom, and Abraham stayed in the land of Canaan. Now in Genesis 13, continuing in verses 14 to 18, and the Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, "Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward, for all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever." And if you remember, my friends, remember I say, how long is forever? It's a long time. So it's still in force today. And he says, "I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth." My friends, can you count the dust of the earth? He says, "So that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you." Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. Now, do you know, most of you maybe know where Hebron is on the map? It's almost like directly south of Jerusalem, not too far away. It's a beautiful city. I love going there. It's one of my favorite places to go. And Hebron's just this beautiful area of the land, very close to the getting into the Dead Sea and the desert area, but it has a lot of beautiful springs and beautiful nature there. It's a very, very beautiful place. So this is a map I put together, or I found, and you may not be able to see it. Maybe you can take a screenshot of it and then blow it up so you can see it in more detail. But you see up here at the top, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but up here at the top, the Hittite Empire, that's modern day Turkey. That whole big brown area is like Turkey. And then you see the red line. So Abram on the right-hand side, he came out of Chaldea, out of Babylon, and he came out and walked around the fertile valley, because this is all where that green is the fertile valley. And he came and he settled in the land, and he eventually went into Egypt, but then he came back. But that's how far he journeyed. In Abram, he put away idolatry. God said, "Get up, pack up your things, and go." You can read the accounts in Genesis. I don't have time to go through all the history now, but go through the books of Genesis where Abram's story starts and read it and see what God promised him and where he went and where he had to journey from. That's a long journey. If God told you, my friends, "Hey, pick up your things and go to the place where I will show you," and you didn't even know where you were going, would you have the faith of Abraham to pick up your family, your servants, and go to all your possessions and just go, and then God's going to lead you and guide you on the way? Would you have the faith of Abraham to do that? Now, in Genesis 15, verses 18 to 21, it says, "On the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, 'To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt,'" that's the Nile River, "'to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. All the land between the two great rivers." It's a lot of land. And I'm going to show it to you here on the map. It's a lot of land. Look at this. This is the full promised land of Israel, given to Abraham and then passed on to Isaac and Jacob. And they've never realized this yet. But that's about 1,500 square miles, and that is what the New Jerusalem in the kingdom, the Jerusalem, will be at this big. This is the holy city, that the land that is partitioned for when Messiah returns, when Yeshua comes. This is the territory of the promise of the land given to Abraham, and Israel has never realized it yet in its history. But this was given to Abraham all the way back in Genesis. So on the left-hand side, you see that left arrow. Look, that's the river. Then the arrow that goes down to the left, that's the Nile River. So that whole area, that's like half of Egypt right now. That's the Sinai Peninsula, that little peninsula you see there. And then it goes all the way over parts of Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, all the way up to the Euphrates River, bordering almost the Turkish Empire there. That's a lot of land. That's half of Iraq, half of Iran. That's so much land that God promised to give to Abraham. And that promise is still in force. It just has not come to fruition yet, but it will in the very near future when Messiah returns. This will be the land of Israel. And they're squabbling over the little dinky territory of Israel now that's so small. But look at this area that will eventually become the kingdom of Israel. Now in Genesis 22, in verses 15 to 18, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham. By this time, Abram's name was changed to Abraham. When God cut the covenant with him, he changed his name from Abram to Abraham. And he called him a second time out of heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn." Now think about that, my friends. Adonai, God Elohim, the creator of heaven and earth, says, "By myself I have sworn. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son." Remember, this is at the time when he went to Mamre. He went up to Mount Moriah. He was going to sacrifice Isaac. And then the angel stopped him. Sorry, I'm not going through all the history here. I'm just giving you the highlights. But right when he was going to kill Isaac, and he did that, Isaac gave himself up. And the reason he gave himself up is because they believed in the resurrection. And Abraham knew the promise that God gave him. And he says, okay, well, if he's not going to do it now, he's going to resurrect Isaac. And through Isaac, the promise will come. He knew the promise was going to come. He just didn't know how. But God stopped him. The angel stopped him. And he says, because you have done this thing, you have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing, I will bless you, and multiplying, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven. So first it's the dust of the earth. Now it's the stars of the heaven. My friends, do you know there are hundreds of billions of stars in heaven? And as the sand which is on the seashore. I have no idea how much sand is on the seashore, but I know it's a lot. More probably than there are stars in the heavens. But there is a lot of sand, there's a lot of dust on the earth, and there are a lot of stars in heaven. And God says, I will multiply your descendants as much as them, and your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Not just some, not just one or two, but all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, and they have been blessed because you have obeyed my voice. And out of him, out of his loins and his descendants came the Messiah, who has in that seed blessed all the nations and the whole earth. And if Isaac was spared here, but we know that God the Father, Abba, gave up his only son, his only begotten son, whom he was well pleased with, whom he loved, who did not deserve to die, gave up his life willingly for us. Each one of us should have been hung on that tree, crucified on that stake. And instead, the Creator, Son, who I believe Yeshua was the creator, and God's the architect, but the Messiah did all the work, and he gave up his life for us. And we, my friends, during this season, during this year, we need to commit ourselves, our lives to God. Stop fooling around with worldly pursuits, lusts of the flesh, lusts of the eyes, materialism, and all the other nonsense that's in the world right now. And it's time to recommit, rededicate ourselves to the living God who is still working out this plan for all of humanity. So Abraham was faithful. We need to be faithful also as Abraham was. Now in Genesis chapter 22 and verse 19, we read, Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. Now Beersheba, if you look at the map here, you see where Bethel is. You see where Salem is. That's Mount Moriah. That's Jerusalem, modern day Jerusalem. And then you go a little further south. That's Hebron, which Mamre, which is where he was first living. And then he went further south to Beersheba. And I've been to Beersheba again. Between Beersheba and Hebron, I got to say, it's one of my favorite areas of the land. I just love that area. I don't know why, but I love the mountains, the ruggedness. Sometimes it's like when you're driving from the Dead Sea up to Beersheba. I've done that drive, and you go through Arad, and it's like driving through the Grand Canyon. And then you get into this beautiful area with greenery and flowing hills and mountains, and you get up to Hebron, and it's just a beautiful area. And I just really enjoy going there. In fact, I'm itching to go back there soon, because I'm anxious to go back to the land. The land is calling my voice again. But Abraham lived in the promised land, and he enjoyed it. And we're going to see here very shortly that Isaac was finally born to him again. So I know we talked about he was giving up Isaac earlier, but I wanted to show you the promise that was given to him again. But here we'll backtrack a little bit. We'll go back to Genesis 16. And in Genesis 16, verse 1, it talks about Sarah, who at that time was Sarai, and that was Abram's wife, and had borne him no children. And she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Now, again, we see that this is maybe one of the great tests of Abram. He didn't wait for the Lord to fulfill his promise. He said he was going to give him a seed through him, and he didn't really take into account that Abram and Sarai were one. They were husband and wife. They were one, and he should have realized that it could only come through Sarai, not through someone else. But they took the plan, they tried to accelerate the plan of God, and it created a big mess. And we see that mess in the world even until today. So anyhow, Abram goes in, the Hagar, the Egyptian mistress or the Egyptian maidservant of Sarai, she conceives, and she bears a son. They call him Ishmael. Then in verses 5 and 6, Sarai says to Abraham, my wrong be upon you. So now she's blaming Abram. Look what you've done. I gave my maid into your embrace. And when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me. Well, he did judge between her and Abram. And what Sarah did was not right. She should not have. She tried to take things in her own hands. Abraham, like Adam, when Eve made a suggestion about the tree, gave in to his wife's suggestion, and we have chaos that ensues after it. So Abram says to Sarai, indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please. And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. So basically, Sarai said, you know what? You're not going to have this son. You're out of my camp. Get out of my life. Go. And I think Sarai at that time, she said, you know what? I'd rather be childless than to have a son through this maidservant. So she basically kicked her out, excommunicated her from the community, and said, hey, hit the road and go. And so she did. Hagar and her son, they left. So the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to the shore. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from and where are you going? Don't you love how the angels ask these questions? They know. He knows where she came from and where she's going, but he wants to hear it from her. So Hagar says, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. So the angel said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. So yes, the Lord, through Abraham's sake, honored Hagar, but he chastised her and said, hey, go back and submit yourself. Don't get haughty. Don't get arrogant. Don't think that because you conceived that you are above your mistress or, the mistress. So she's the maidservant. And so she had to humble herself and go back to the camp. So she went back and God spoke to Abraham and Sarah, and then they were able to stay there for a little while. But before she left, listen to this promise in Genesis 16, verses 10 to 12. Look at what the angel of the Lord said to Hagar. He says, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And that's exactly what has happened and continues until today. So let me just go back here a minute. So we have this, we have Ishmael, and through him descended a lot of the Arab nations. And through him, we have a lot of problems, right? Now, you have to keep in mind, my friends, that Ishmael and Isaac both buried Abraham when he died, and they honored him. And I think they dwelt in peace for a while. But here in this future prophecy, he said that he will be a wild man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And he does, right? Israel is there in the midst of all the Ishmaelites that are surrounding. Now, there's other non-Ishmaelite nations there. There's Philistine nation. There's still the descendants from some of the Canaanites are still there. But Ishmael was there in the midst of all of Israel. And to this day, he's a wild man, right? We have all these issues in the world, but they are brothers. Okay, you have to understand that the Ishmaelites and the children of Israel are brothers, okay, half brothers. And so for the most part, there should be peace between them, but not in all cases. And the enemy gets in and lies and creates all kinds of turmoil. That's why he's a wild man, because he did not get the promise that was given to his brother Isaac. So, and then we continue in Genesis chapter 17, verses 4 through 8. God says, my covenant is with you. He's talking to Abraham, and you shall be a father of many nations. That's why his name was changed to Abraham. He says, no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant. Here we have that word again, everlasting, forever. This covenant is still in place, still in force to today. And it says, I'm going to be a God to you and your descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So the land was given to Abraham, who gave it to his descendants, not to Ishmael, because that he is not the child of promise, as we're going to see, but he gave it to Isaac and his descendants after him. And this is still enforced. This covenant is still enforced today. And it's really, my friends, it's God's land. And God gives it to every whom he wants to give it to. And he gave it to Abram and his descendants, and no one can take that away. That's why there's been all these attempts to eradicate the Jewish nation, the Israelite nation, and they can't do it because God's hand is upon that land and upon his people. Now, he expels them when they sin, when they do idolatry, when they commit fornication before him and harlotry, and they go after other gods, and he kicked them out of the land twice, and now they're in trouble. Even today, they just sometimes don't learn their lesson, but I think they're there to stay until the Messiah comes, or they're the anchor that's there now until Messiah returns. And then there will finally be true peace upon this earth, as I went through my teachings during the holy days. Now, in Genesis chapter 17, verses 10 through 12, we read, he continues, "This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant." So that was the sign that was given to Abraham and to his descendants. Until then, no one else was being circumcised, and that circumcision was the sign of the covenant between God and the children of Abraham. And then God said to Abraham in verses 15 and 16, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her." So there, they tried to get ahead of God by allowing Abraham to go into Hagar. And here's the promise to Sarah. Abraham and Sarah were one unit, and it was through Sarah that the promise would be fulfilled. He said, "Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him." So there you go, my friends. Again, that word everlasting was given to Abraham because of his faithfulness, and given to Isaac because of Abraham's faithfulness. Not because of Isaac, not that they deserved it, not that they did anything undeserving, but it's through Abraham that this promise is being fulfilled and enforced even until today. Now, in Genesis chapter 17, verses 20 and 21, he says, "As for Ishmael, I have heard you," because Abraham was saying, "Oh, if only everything would go through Ishmael, if he would stand before you." And he said, "No, Sarah's going to have a son, and you're going to call him Isaac. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you, Abraham. I heard your prayers. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princesses, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year." And that's exactly what happened in the next year. Isaac was born. And then in verses uh, jumping ahead to Genesis 21, verses 8 to 10, talking of Isaac, it says the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. She didn't learn her lesson, right? Therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. So again, Hagar gets kicked out of the camp. And God tells Abraham to obey him. In verses 11 to 13, the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. You see how God honors us, my friends? You know, even though Abraham and Sarah kind of did their own thing, God allowed it to happen. God allowed Hagar to have a son, Ishmael. It's Abraham's son, and he still blesses him. He doesn't destroy him, doesn't cast him out. He says, I'm going to bless him. You're going to have 12 princes, and you're going to be a great nation. I'm going to bless him exceedingly because he's your son. And he did. Who do you think has all the oil and the gold in the Middle East today? Huh? Where do all those riches come from? When you go to Dubai, Qatar, and all those wonderful Arab nations, where do you think all of those riches came from? Who has blessed them? Well, they're blessed because of Abraham. Why do you think they called it the Abrahamic accordance that they just signed? You know, the Accords, the Abraham Accords. You know, there's a reason behind all this. The family is getting back together. The animosities that Satan has instilled in the brotherhood is being destroyed, being dismantled. And then they're going to honor and respect each other and allow each other to dwell in the land and realize that they are brothers, that they are family, and hopefully one day they will dwell together in total peace. But in the meantime, you have the Philistines, who are not part of Ishmael, and you got these Hamas terrorists, and you got these outcasts that are really trying to destroy the family. Those are the ones that are creating all the trouble today. They are not Ishmael's descendants. They are outside of the family of Abraham. Now, in Genesis chapter 23, verses 1 to 2, we read about Sarah's death. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron. So they went back to Hebron. That's where she died, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And if you remember, he bought the cave of Machpelah. And then after he buried Sarah, he took another wife in Genesis 25, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him. Now look at all these sons: Zimran, Jashkan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jashkan begot Sheba and Dedan. That's part of Saudi Arabia. And the sons of Dedan were Asherim, Letushim, and Leumim. And the sons of Midian were Ephah, and then Epher, Hanak, Abidah, and Eldaah. All these were the children of Keturah. And I don't have time to go through all of these descendants and where they are, but they're all there in the Middle East today. So you have many sons that were born from Ishmael. He had 12 princes. And then there's other sons that were born through Keturah, but they're all Abraham's descendants. Abraham's descendants are as the sand of the sea and the stars of heaven today. Are you with me so far, my friends? Are you understanding? Are you getting this? that Abraham's descendants far exceed just the Israelite people. His descendants reach far and wide, and he had a lot of descendants after Sarah died. Now we get into Ishmael's descendants. Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael in Genesis 25. Why did God leave us this? He wants us to understand and to know. He goes, Abraham, talking about who, from Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nabajoth, then Kedar, then Abiel, Mibsan, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jator, Naphish, and Kedamar. So these are the sons and descendants of Ishmael, the 12 princes. And they dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt as you go toward Assyria. So that's all of like the Sinai, east of Egypt is the Sinai Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, all that area is where they dwelt. Now here, look at this. Here we go. So not really Sinai, because that was given to Abraham, but look at the territory of the Ishmaelites and the Amalekites. It goes from Mount Sinai all the way over to Havilah, all the way over there in the Persian Gulf, okay, toward Assyria. We know that Assyria was like modern day Iran, right? So we're all that territory there, the southern part of, that kind of like the middle of Saudi Arabia, that whole area there was given to the Ishmaelites, even though, that land was promised to Abraham. But look at that. They are given, the Ishmaelites actually helped fulfill and dwelt in much of that land that was promised to Abraham at the very, very beginning. So from, not quite all of it, but a big chunk of it. And you can read about that also in 1 Samuel chapter 15 and in 1 Samuel 27 talks about, the boundary, the western boundaries and the eastern boundaries of the Ishmaelites. So when you go and you look at a modern day map, you'll see that that area is still maintained and dwelt in by the descendants of Ishmael. Now, look at this. Abraham's descendants. Look at this, how far it goes. It goes from Iraq, in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, all the Arab nations are all Abraham's inheritance. Do you understand that? All the riches, all the oil, all the gold, all the wealth that is in the Middle East are all descended from Abraham's inheritance. So it's a lot, right? And it's a lot. His the descendants from the rest of from Keturah and from Hagar and Ishmael really goes far and wide. But you'll see that Isaac and then Jacob and the 12 sons of Jacob, they have their population too and their inheritance. And you'll see that through them all the earth was blessed. Okay, the Ishmaelites, they pretty much just stayed in the Middle East. What we're going to see probably in next week's episode, and as we talk about the 12 sons of Jacob, that all the earth is blessed through them. So God has this master plan. We can't outthink God. We can't think that we know better than God. God's wisdom, his understanding, his knowledge, his plan, even though we don't understand it at times and we don't know why all this chaos is in the world, and we had like the Holocaust and we have all the stuff that's going on today, and wars after wars after wars. Yes, the evil one is always trying to destroy the children of God, but through those attempts, God multiplies his word and his presence, and it gets spread throughout the whole world as the people are dispersed and they go through the whole world, and the knowledge of God covers the whole earth. So there's not a place on earth that you go to that people haven't heard the word of Jesus or Yeshua. They know. So it has been spread far and wide throughout the whole earth. Now, going back to Genesis 26, we talk about God's promise to Isaac. Okay? It's a reaffirmation of the covenant originally made with Abraham. And during a time of famine, the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. And to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give to your offspring all these lands, and in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed." Just as I said, through Isaac. Remember, Isaac's the only one who never left the land. He stayed in the land his whole life. Now let's take a look at and let me keep myself off so you can see everything. Let's look at Isaac and some of the key elements of the promise that was made to him. Now, it talks about divine presence and blessing. God assured Isaac of his presence and favor. And you might want to take a picture of this slide. And then we talk about the land inheritance. Isaac and his descendants were promised the land of Canaan. And then about numerous descendants. Another element, his offspring would be as countless as the stars. And then there's the universal blessing. Through his lineage, all nations of the earth would be blessed, foreshadowing the coming of the Messiah. And then we have the covenantal continuity. This promise was a continuation of the covenant made with Abraham, grounded in Abraham's obedience and faith. Remember, it's through Abraham's obedience and faith that this promise was kept and fulfilled in Isaac, and as we will see here in a few minutes, passed down to Isaac's son, and who is Jacob. So Isaac had two sons. You remember the story about Jacob and Esau? And they were twins. They were born. Esau came out first, though, but Jacob grabbed his heel as he was coming out, and Jacob's name means supplanter. And he would eventually supplant Esau as getting the firstborn promise and getting the blessing. And that exactly happened. And then Esau got mad at Jacob, was going to kill him, and Jacob had to flee. And he went to Abraham's descendants. He went to can't think of his name, Laban. He went to Laban's house, who was his mother's brother, and he dwelt there and served him. And Laban ended up being more of a trickster than Jacob ever was, and tricked him into serving him for his daughter, whom he loved. He wanted Rachel, but Laban tricked him and gave him the elder one, Leah. And so Jacob married her. Then he had to serve another 7 years to get Rachel. And the story goes, you can read about the accounts in Genesis where he changed his wages like 10 times. And finally, he had to have his maid servants. And, Jacob's life was a mess. He ended up having 4 wives. He had all these children. And he's in a place that is being a little hospitable to him, hostile towards him, I mean. And so he ends up fleeing with all his family and all his possessions, comes back to the land, meets up with Esau again, and he thinks Esau's going to kill him. but they end up embracing and they go their separate ways. And Jacob comes back and resettles in the land. But this is after like 20 years. So God's promise to Jacob, the grandson of Abraham and son of Isaac, is a continuation of the Abrahamic covenant and unfolds across several key moments in Genesis. Now, here's a breakdown of the divine assurances given to Jacob. While fleeing from Esau, Jacob dreams of a ladder reaching to heaven with angels ascending and descending. God speaks to him and says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you now lie. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And we can read about that in Genesis 28. And I encourage all of you to just go and read this history through Genesis. It's the beginning of the Torah cycle. We're going to be going through that on the Daily Torah program in the coming weeks ahead, but you can go ahead and read ahead of time. But as we get into it in the next few weeks, we're going to go through all of this history. So if you're not listening to the Daily Torah program, please do so. It's published, produced every day, and they're very short educational episodes, about 15 minutes. But by the end of the week, you've read the whole Torah, the half Torah, and the Brit Hadashah. So I encourage you to subscribe and plug in to the Daily Torah program. So in Bethel, again, he reaffirms the promise a second time, and he renames Jacob to Israel. This is how Israel got its name. So in Genesis chapter 35, verses 10 to 12, God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. Also, God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. Well, I think Jacob was already doing that. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. The land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, I give to you, and to your descendants after you, I give this land. So there you have it, my friends. God's promise to Israel that the land of Israel, from the boundaries from the river Nile to the river Euphrates, really belongs to the nation of Israel today, because that was the land that was promised to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And they should be fulfilling that promise, but they haven't fulfilled it yet, but they soon will when the Messiah returns. But isn't it exciting? God changed Abram to Abraham, but he never changed Isaac's name. You know why? Isaac never left the land. God didn't have a reason. He was born in the land and he stayed in the land. There was no need to change anything. But Jacob was born in the land and left the land and had to come back. And his name was changed to Israel because he wrestled with God and prevailed. Remember that story? When he came into the land, when he was going to meet Esau again, he had that all-night wrestling match with the angel of the Lord, who many believe could have been Yeshua himself. And the angel touched his hip, and he walked on a limp ever since that day. And so his name was changed to Israel at that moment, and it's been Israel ever since. Now let's look at some of the key elements of the promise that was given to Jacob, the reaffirmation. The land, the territory of Canaan would belong to Jacob and his descendants. His descendants, his offspring would be numerous and form nations. And we're going to get into that next week. The blessings. All families of the earth would be blessed through his lineage. And then the divine presence. God would be with Jacob, protect him, and bring him back to the land. And then the legacy. Jacob's name changed to Israel. This is very important, my friends out there. Pay attention. Jacob's name change to Israel marks the beginning of the nation that bears his name. Very, very important to understand this history, my friends, of how Israel came into existence. So if we recap for today, and we have quite a few minutes left yet, we went through the promises that were made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We talked about the descendants of Abraham and Ishmael, and the descendants of his, after Sarah died, Keturah, and where they are. I probably could have gone into more detail on some of those. Maybe in another teaching, I will go through the lineage of Ishmael and tie that back to this teaching and some of the modern day prophecies and some of the modern day issues that are happening in the world today. That might be a good teaching to do in the future. And then we discussed Jacob's name changed to Israel. And next week, we're going to get into that more deeply and the spiritual significance of this. Not only the physical, but the spiritual significance of this name change. Now, next week, we're going to do Who is Israel Part 2. And then we're going to get into a Part 3 episode that we're going to talk about after this one. And then we're going to talk about grafted in. We're going to bring it all into the time of Yeshua all the way to modern times. But next week, we're going to do Part 2, Who is Israel? We're going to talk about the 12 sons of Israel, the 12 tribes. We're going to talk about Joseph in Egypt. Remember the story of Joseph going down to Israel? He was sold by his brothers. He went down to Egypt, became second in command, and then everyone went back down to Israel during the famine and lived there for 400 years and finally came out during the Exodus in the time of Moses. And they returned to the promised land. So we're going to go through some of that history next week. It's very, very important to understand that history because when they come back to the promised land, we have the allocation of territory by tribe. Okay, and if you remember when Joseph is in Egypt, he has two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And those sons are adopted by Jacob. So there's actually now 13 tribes, right? And because Joseph, the two tribes basically replace kind of Joseph, it becomes like a 13th tribe. It really could be like 14 tribes, depending on how you count it. But all of them are allocated land. So when they come back, Joseph doesn't really have, there's no land of Joseph, but it's the land of Manasseh and the land of Ephraim and Joseph's sons. So the land gets allocated to each of them. And then through that, after they conquered the land, we finally have the unified kingdom of Israel. And all is good for a long time, right? Under King David, everything is unified. And then Solomon is born, who is supposed to be the wisest person ever born, but through him came the division. After his death, we have the divided kingdom. And we're going to get into the divided kingdom starting in part 3. So I hope this has been educational to you, this first part. Feel free to leave comments in the comment section. Share this with your friends and family. Let them know that I'm going through this series. I think it's going to be very educational as we wrap it up in parts 2 and 3, because it's very important in part 3 that each of us knows who we are and how we are grafted in to the whole house of Israel. Okay, we're no longer people who are non-Israelite. We get into all these bloodlines, right? Do I come from one of the tribes? Do I come from here? Do I come from there? What is my lineage? Well, in Messiah, it doesn't really matter because there's so much intermarriage throughout all of history that it doesn't matter, except for the sons of Judah who have been given the oracles of God. It's important for them to maintain their lineage because it's through them that the Torah was given, and they have the responsibility of maintaining the Torah and keeping things in order. And we're going to go through some of that about the responsibilities of Judah, the responsibilities of the Levites. We're going to go through the 12 tribes, where they were dispersed around the world and after the kingdom was split. So we're going to go through a lot of that in part 3 and how we are grafted in to the whole house of Israel, no matter where your lineage is from, and that you are no longer considered a Gentile if you are grafted in to the whole house of Israel. You are part of Israel. So say to yourself right now, are you part of Israel? Say, I am part of Israel. If you have accepted Yeshua the Messiah as your Lord and Savior, if you've been baptized and immersed, have hands laid on you, and received the gift of the Holy Spirit, then you are no longer a Gentile. As in Romans 11, you are grafted into the whole house of Israel. And just as you graft in a wild olive branch to a native one, after that grafting is done, you cannot tell the wild from the natural. And we're going to get into all that history in parts 2 and 3. But until then, God bless, Shalom Aleichem, and we'll see you next week. If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network. We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Jeffrey Clark. Thank you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.